Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Wisdom of the World show. My name is Jack Butler. Thank you for joining us. And my guest today is Michael Dolan of True Productivity. Michael is a good friend of mine. We met just over a year ago on our Enneagram studies in Minneapolis. He's based in Marin County, California, a place that's close to my heart and maybe even a future potential home. Today we're going to be talking about productivity, leadership, what true productivity really means, and hopefully getting onto some practices that might help you become more truly productive in your own life. So, Michael, welcome to today's show.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's fun to be in this kind of format of conversation with you and to see what kind of interesting conversation ideas and how helpful we can be for your audience.
Excellent. Well, I hope we can be very helpful. Why don't you kick off by giving us an introduction to kind of who you are and where you're coming from?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a coach, and usually I call myself an executive coach, but whenever I work with anyone, whether they're professionals or not, I'm always working with the whole person. So sometimes, when I say, oh, I'm a coach, somebody says, oh, you mean a life coach? And I say, well, kind of, sort of. Mostly I'm working with professionals, so I call myself an executive coach, but I really work on the whole life. And they go, oh, I think I understand.
Got it.
So I'm a coach. I've been doing this work it'll be 7 years in January. I'm a father of 2 young kids. I'm a husband to a wonderful wife, Annalisa, who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And my work focuses on the I think both of us talk about our work in terms of what intersection it focuses on. With your work being about this place of entrepreneurship and leadership and personal mastery, and my work is really taking a lot of experience I've had around productivity.
Yes.
And looking at, well, how do I get stuff done in the world, and then bringing in leadership, or really fundamentally the way I look at leadership is, bringing your whole self as a human being to your work with other people in the world. So, looking at the intersection of those two things and all the tangents off of that is what I do.
Fantastic. So you call what you do true productivity. I wondered if that might be a good place for us to start. Like, what do you mean by true productivity?
Yeah, the emerging name for my work. And actually, I just had a call with a trademark attorney, so we'll see if this actually is available.
Yep.
But the emerging name for my practice is Truly Productive Leadership.
Yes.
So leadership is in there as well. But actually, it's funny, as I was preparing for this call and we had talked about the questions we were going to talk about, I actually put into words kind of like my current thinking of what the heck does true productivity mean. And this is what came out. Taking action in appropriate ways on the things that matter the most in any given moment.
I like that.
In a way, not that.
Okay.
In a way that maintains or builds presence rather than destroys it.
Very good.
Okay, so in a way, taking action in appropriate ways on the things that matter most sometimes could mean, right now, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to take a breath and feel my toes and just be inquisitive about the moment. Sometimes, truly productive could mean picking up the phone to make that very confronting phone call that you've been avoiding.
Yeah.
So it's not always about being in action in the typical ways that, I think is people talk about in terms of productivity.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a nutshell. That's kind of that arose this morning, and maybe a way to it might help if I talk a little bit about my background and kind of how this concept of true productivity
came to be.
Yeah, came to be, and you know the story, but I'll share it a little bit more for your audience. So, about 7 years ago, or a little bit more than 7 years ago, I was at a point where I had a bunch of careers before I was a coach, mostly around advertising and marketing. But I'd always had this sense of dissatisfaction, or there's something else out there for me. There's some other kind of work that I should be doing, or that's more of a fit
Right.
with who I am. And I had just gotten married, and I was expecting my first child, and coaching was always kind of on my little someday list. Like, maybe that's what I should be doing.
Someday, maybe.
Yeah. And actually, in previous years, the first time I came across anything regarding like coaching or productivity was when I was working as a brand manager in a big consumer products company,
Right.
Clorox. And this one year, I got my review, and it was, not bad. Not bad for somebody who's not totally engaged in their work and wondering what they should be doing.
Yes.
And but the worst little score on the page was planning and organizing. So my boss said, "Hey, we should do something about that." And I acknowledged, like, yeah, I think I have a way of keeping track of what I need to do and doing it, but looking back on it, like, I was totally out of control. And so the person that the way I addressed that was I got in touch with this guy, David Allen, who's a fairly well-known author. Actually, at that point, he hadn't written his book yet.
Oh, really?
And he was doing a seminar at Clorox, and I went to the seminar, and then I got 2 days of coaching from, at that point, it was his wife, Catherine, that was doing a lot of the coaching.
I didn't realize she did. Yeah.
Yeah, so I came across the world of like productivity coaching because I needed help.
Yes.
And I was a bit out of control.
Right.
And learned a ton and really changed my whole, in a way, changed a lot in my life, but through the lens of kind of becoming more and more aware of how I manage the agreements I make with myself.
Yes.
How I manage, if I say, yeah, I'll call you back, or yeah, let's have dinner, or I'll get that to you by Wednesday, or I think I want to go to, climb Mount Kilimanjaro someday. How do I manage that?
Yeah.
And so my awareness around that, my level of expertise grew and grew and grew. And then years later, I was at this point about, well, what should I really be doing in my life? And coaching came up as the kind of the number one kind of pull for me. And then I put two and two together, and ended up working for David Allen for about 5 years or so.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of our audience will be aware of GTD and David Allen's work and the kind of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I find that there's like a 15 to 20% awareness out there among people. So I learned a ton from David. I was an individual one-on-one coach. So the way it would work is probably about 8 days a month I'd be sitting with usually executives at their desk, helping them kind of tear down and then build back up their own process and system of how they keep track of everything, how they manage all those agreements they have, the projects, the delegations, all that stuff.
Yes.
And got a lot of experience, learned what it was to be a coach, learned what it was to be a trusted partner that in many ways in that work was about consulting and teaching, but in some cases in that work, some really deep issues and problems came up along the way while we were working on productivity. So, built my competence at playing the role, being a coach.
Yes.
Okay, and so getting back to the answer to this question about what is true productivity, the David Allen's method, it's kind of loosely called GTD for getting things done, which is the name of his book.
Yes.
It really works. Maybe not for everyone, but there's a certain universality and higher level principles that really apply in general to human beings and how they, a great way of managing all the stuff you need to do. Right?
Yes.
And what I saw along the way in my work, working with hundreds of clients, was that, yes, they'd be learning these new ways of essentially how to keep the stuff out of my head and in a system outside of myself.
Yes.
In a way that I could really trust it's there, that my mind can really let it go until I focus on it, so that I can have more presence and more focus. So teaching people this, it really, most of the time, lots of early breakthroughs, people really got it.
Yeah.
Some people have a lot more difficulty than others. But what I saw, even with the clients who really, really kind of took on the practices, had breakthroughs early on about, God, I'm focusing on all this stuff that I was avoiding, or I'm getting so much more done because I'm not spinning my wheels, or I'm able to let go of delegations because I have a way of tracking them in a better way.
Yes.
Things like that. What I saw was that the breakdowns that would happen weeks and months later, as they were still using those practices, but they were still being themselves in the world, the breakdowns that would happen around productivity weren't necessarily always connected to not doing those productivity practices.
Yes.
If there's this thing called the weekly review that's like a big part of the maintenance habit of keeping a system like that going, an approach like that going. Even if they were doing the weekly reviews, maybe their fundamental difficulty in productivity, which may be, we'll make one up, like avoiding the most confronting, most important things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all have that a little bit, right?
Yes.
But the highest importance kind of productivity issue that they were dealing with from the beginning still isn't being resolved.
Yes.
So what I started to notice again and again and become more curious about was, what's really going on with those areas? That's way beyond this, David Allen GTD approach. This is much more around self-awareness
mm-hmm.
and kind of getting onto things about yourself that you're blind to.
Yes.
And so that kind of started this whole path for me of really kind of the question of how do I work more deeply with people around productivity, but just developing in general.
Yes.
And along the way, I was attracted to getting some training and coaching, and went through a year-long program with a place called New Ventures West in San Francisco, and they have an integral coaching approach, which is kind of aligned with what I'm talking about, working with the whole person, not just the head and the what I think about my work and my agreements and myself, but the heart, the body, our ability to be in touch with our sensations and our gut feeling and our presence physically, relational, spiritual, all aspects. And then, of course, you and I met learning about one of the other tools that I use very deeply, which is the Enneagram. Which is really, of course, a very powerful tool of self-awareness and development on all different levels. So that's, coming back to true productivity, that's where that definition comes from, is kind of what I've experienced in the world as a coach and what has drawn my attention. And so that's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You've sat, as you say, with a lot of executives. You've been in a lot of offices and kind of seen what goes on. What would you say are like the number one or two presenting issues? So like what are the number one or two things that people typically say to you, this is the issue, or if only I could, or this is where I'm all over the place? Are there any generalities that one can draw at that level before one gets into the deeper or what's really going on?
Yeah, well, it depends. The reason I have this quizzical look on my face is because nowadays,
mm-hmm.
Clients come to me for a broader set of, or with a broader set of presenting issues than my days at the Allen company.
Got it. Yeah.
So, for instance, I have one client that I'm working with now who the coaching came about just off of a conversation we had. We met at a cocktail party, and I mentioned a little bit about what I did, and his presenting issue was kind of a matter of like, am I engaged in life? I'm feeling really stagnant here, and even beyond kind of productivity, it was more like this is a guy who survived some cancer and
mm-hmm.
went through a period of healing and kind of thinking maybe my life's not going to be that long, and that was a few years ago. And but that's one of the themes.
Can you still hear me?
can I be more engaged as a leader or as a contributor? But the typical productivity presenting issues are things like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm out of balance, I'm too stuck in the weeds, and I can't think strategically like my boss wants me to.
Yes.
I can't sleep at night because I'm so stressed out.
Oh, yeah.
So the kind of, all that you can almost boil down to issues of balance is the way I look at it.
Yes.
Do I have a competence at adjusting my focus and where I take action, informed by a larger perspective of what I see as important? Or am I thrown so much by so many different competing commitments that I totally lose track of I say the for the sake of what in my life or my work?
Yes.
But that's a taste of the presenting issues.
Yes.
There's more.
Yeah, fantastic. So with the, for the sake of what and questions of balance, does that look different, or does that look differently to people at different levels of consciousness? Because I know, from your studies of the Enneagram and also, integral coaching methodology, there's a sense that there are different perspectives that people take as they become more adaptive to the environment, or more evolved, or more present, whatever language you put around that. So is there one size fits all approach to balance, or is that a different strategy that's needed at different levels?
No, great question. In a way, it reminds me of the trip I came back from last week. I was telling you before the interview. I just went and finished 7 year-long executive coaching engagements, and so your question kind of has me think about all those 7 people. And the truth about the world is everybody is different, and everybody, one size fits all does not work.
Yes.
Especially talking about being a partner in development for a human being. With regard to my work, sometimes all a client is in need of and or has an opening for is just help me be less stressed and focus on some more of the right stuff, so I don't drop balls.
Yes.
And for them, that is a huge breakthrough, massive. And there's no need or question for or opening for. Oh my gosh, I feel I need more connection to something more true in my life, and there's something aching for me spiritually. That's like out the window, right?
Yes.
And,
or not even in through the window.
Yeah. And but this actually reminds me of a really powerful conversation I once had when I was in my years with the David Allen Company. I had gone out to work with this client and focus on the David Allen approach and help him implement it. And it was a really difficult coaching for me. It was probably in my 2nd year, so I wasn't yet really didn't have as much experience as I do now. But this client, it was difficult for me because this client I was working with, it's almost like the concepts and practices that normally with a typical client, they'd be doing 100 times in 2 days.
Yes.
Sometimes I do people for 2 days. This client could hardly do 3 in a day. So his capacity, and it was, I think, a cognitive thing.
Right.
But his capacity for grokking it, practicing it, doing it, thinking it through in this way was just totally different.
Yes. Than
these other clients. And I came back from this trip.
And
I was in the airport having a lunch after the plane landed or something like that. And I ended up sitting next to this woman. We started chatting and, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. And I told her, and she was a teacher, an award-winning teacher. In the States, we have this thing called the Golden Apple Award. I think each state may have a version of it. It's like, the state's top teachers.
Okay.
So she's the Golden Apple Award-winning primary teacher. and she knows that I'm this executive coach. And I told her, I said, she asked me about my trip, and I said, yeah, I shared the difficulty, and I feel like I could have done so much more for this client. Is the kind of feeling that was in me, like I failed, was kind of where it was. And she told me about this. I think she called it the theory of proximal learning. Maybe you've heard of it.
Maybe not.
Learning, okay. So, and it was like, okay, and she drew on a piece of paper a dot, and centric circles, right? And the point is, for each individual person or student, there's only so far that they are able to go, that they're ready to go.
Yes.
Where they can go in their development or their learning, and for one person this can be a breakthrough. For another person, this is going to be a breakthrough.
Yes.
Able and ready because they've already gone through those other. They have that either competence or knowledge or whatever.
Yes.
So getting back to your question, I've been doing my own practice for about 1.5 years now, and I've struggled with that question of, do I really only want to work with people who are on a deeper spiritual path and, that do that deep work with them? Or am I also here to serve those who need development just as much, but their version of a breakthrough is different?
Yes.
Everybody is different, and for some, it can be like a shallow level. It can be a huge jump experientially for them, and for others, it's much more of a deep path.
Deep dive, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess to reflect back, you're saying that people's developmental paths are unique, and I was actually having a really interesting conversation just Friday night. I went for dinner with a guy called Clint Fuse, who's quite well known in integral circles. He's done a lot of study close with Ken Wilber, and he was saying that that they're now starting to track that there are basically different developmental pathways that get you to the same place. So your way of understanding Newtonian physics might be like here, and my way is like here, and I may never really kind of get your route, or it would take you a long time, a lot of effort to go that way. But this is kind of quicker for me, and I think it just makes sense that even within people are interested in integral and the psychograph, so this ability to map every line of intelligence. The idea of a line of intelligence is actually is a cognitive convenience. So within each, the cognitive line of development, actually there's so many webs and strands that seem to be working within that, and that seems to be the understanding of self, is that self is a current of many streams that bubble and percolate, kind of in their own unfolding majesty.
Yeah.
So let's move just slightly into the Enneagram. It's an interest that we both share. I'm going to give you permission to generalize and also not to feel the need to touch in on all 9 types. Sorry to people whose type doesn't get quite so mentioned, but it can just become unwieldy in this sort of time we have together. What would you say, looking through this lens of self-management, productivity, what are some of the ways in which the Enneagram has illuminated your inquiry and the way that you can help people?
Well, I think the first answer to that is through my own experience with myself.
Yes.
That's really probably the most powerful learning point that I've had, and has propelled my study in the Enneagram and my experimenting with working with clients with this tool around the question of productivity.
Yes. And I should just caveat very quickly, because anyone who's watching this who doesn't know the Enneagram, just to say that the Enneagram is as a human typology system that suggests that there are 9 human types that have specific ways of showing up in the world, specific thought patterns, ego defenses, energy, and kind of like way of seeing the world.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right.
For that. So your question was about how how have I seen the Enneagram be a helpful tool within the realm of this productivity, this question of true productivity?
Yes.
And I think the first thing is myself. And when I first really accurately figured out which of those 9 types I was.
Yes.
And by the way, for about a year before that, I casually had myself as the wrong type.
What did you think you were?
I thought it was a 7.
You thought you were 7? Yeah.
Yeah, and for the audience, the 7 is often one of the 9 types that everybody wants to be, because it's kind of the shorthand descriptions of the 7 can tend to be things like, enjoys life, joyful, life of the party, lots of different interests, enjoys a lot of things.
Yes.
And of course, there's a dark side to every type too, but that's a really attractive light side. And so I missed myself, but then it was actually during my coaching training that I had some help in typing myself, and somebody asked me a question. They said, "Well, what's your relationship to anger?"
Yes, I remember you telling me this. Yeah.
Yeah, and
what was the answer?
My answer was, I don't have any anger. I never have any anger or rage. And then, of course, my coach was like, "Oh, okay. Right. You might want to look at the 9." And so, without getting into too many details about the Enneagram, what kind of opened up to me when I realized one of the fundamentals about the type 9 type is this kind of artificial desire and commitment to keeping things calm and peaceful, keeping myself calm and peaceful, and the world calm and peaceful. And when I typed myself, and that started a really long, pretty important journey for me of development. When I typed myself, there was this sense like, oh my God, I can now see how much all that repressed, the energy of intensity and anger, and like one of our teachers says, the libidinal energies of the instinctual part of me, which as an average level 9, gets repressed.
Yes.
I saw how dead I was, how disengaged I was in reality, in the world, and how this need to kind of artificially fight against anything that is not going to keep me calm or keep me with a sense of at peaceness or peace, was just killing my sense of vitality.
Yes.
And I saw what I had a faint but sure sense of there is a different way to be in the world that is much more engaged and vital and present. And the path to getting there, at least for me, was about really having the courage to engage and be curious about that kind of, not being angry, but the energy of like assertiveness, pushing back, being important enough in the room to actually stand for yourself and disagree, which if you met me, 10 years ago, I did not have that. I was basically like a wallflower, and I was a nice guy that never disagreed with anybody.
Got it.
So
yes, that's a really interesting move for someone to realize that nice guy is effectively a persona. It's a way of engaging in the world that's that you are something other than the nice guy, and that it's actually okay to be both nice and also a whole set of other things, which could include angry, frustrated, pissed off.
Right, exactly.
Fill in the blanks. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of this like productivity and Enneagram in my own path, something I still struggle with, but have gained a lot of growth around is part of the underlying storyline of the 9 type is kind of my presence here doesn't matter.
Yes. And
don't make too many waves, or everybody else is going to be upset, and that'll ruin your sense of peace and connectedness, your artificial sense of peace and connectedness. So one thing I still struggle with every day is, am I, and this gets really down to the nugget of productivity.
Yes.
Am I really opening my eyes to those things on my calendar or my list that either put me in a position of being out there and big in the world and showing up for real, or things that might be confronting or have something connected to the action or project that has to do with being in conflict with somebody else, which is a big, it's a difficulty for a 9. And so, I've got these GTD practices that are very kind of block and tackle, like, okay, when I've got something on my mind, write it down, and then soon afterwards, decide what you're going to do about that thing you wrote it down and put it in a place that you trust, where you keep your commitments and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I got all those practices in the calendar. But, then there's the practices that get almost like, I was almost going to say layered on to, but have to be complementary to that self-management system.
Yes.
Which are practices around self-awareness.
Yes.
Things like, in my case, mindfulness practices, meditation. For a couple of years, I had a practice of kickboxing, that helped me tap into a pushing, assertive energy and helped me learn that I don't have to be afraid of it, that I can engage in it productively. And, that it might sound tangential, but it's all tied together in terms of being fully engaged, being fully in action, and the things that matter most.
Yes.
So, yeah, the 9 and my own story comes to mind. Do you want to talk about some other types?
Yeah, I think perhaps having a look at the types that are on the triangle of the Enneagram, the 9, 3, and the 6, that sit at the center of each of the head, heart, and gut types. If you're coming at this for the first time, you might just want to have an Enneagram, bring up a picture of an Enneagram online, or go to the EnneagramInstitute.com just to have a visual. Go for it.
Jack, I just have to technically say that your video and audio has just gotten kind of scrambly, so I'm going to try one thing just to reconnect us. I'm not going to disconnect, but I'm just going to turn my video on and off. I think that might help.
Sure
I'm
thing.
worried that might be getting recorded in a bad way.
Okay. Hold
on. All right, so my video's off, and...
Nice picture. Is that helping?
No, yours is still pretty blurry. Maybe do you know how to turn your video on and off?
Sure, I do. 2 secs.
A little bit, camera. Just worried that your folks might not be able to see this.
Any better?
All right, clear whistle. Okay, cool.
Great.
So we were going to talk about the other types.
Yeah. Do you want to have a little exploration around the type 3? I mean, my sense of why type 3 might be interesting is because type 3s are probably known as being productive. Type 3 is the achiever or motivator profile. So type 3s generally seem to have this more innate ability to get a lot of stuff done. But there may be costs to how they're getting things done, or to the way in which they're showing up. So, could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the type 3, in a way, one way to quickly characterize their the kind of the error that their personality structure is kind of aiming at.
Yes,
which is kind of an artificial assumption that their value is tied to their level of accomplishment or what they do in the world, and how they look to the outside world.
Yes.
So they tend to, my 3 clients are really, really productive. But the question is, the topic that they're mostly struggling with, if they're really, if they have an openness and they're kind of starting to become awake to what's going on, is a sense of like, I do all this stuff, but I never feel that good about the world or myself. I don't really get to that sense of satisfaction. And even then, I think about some 3s that I've worked with, and I am working with. There's almost a sense like downplaying that question itself. Like, sometimes I don't feel a little satisfied, but you should hear about this project I'm doing. Man, it's so cool, and I'm getting this new certification. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to work 8 hours this weekend to do this other thing, and so
yes,
this push accomplishment that just and what's kind of the underlying, or my understanding of the underlying, some of the underlying costs or difficulties to face in the path of development for a 3 are about recognizing how much that they have forgotten kind of the relationship side of everything in a way, like their relationship to themselves, their true, deeper selves. What do I really, really care about for real that is my dream? What
Mm.
matters to me in my heart? You know, being confronted with how much they've forgotten that. And, if you talk to many threes, some of the feedback they'll get in 360s can sometimes be around, treating others like they're just cogs in
Yes.
their machine of getting things done.
Their steamroller. Yes.
Right, right. So, the path of growth for them can be very much about, in a way, just like for all of us and for all the 9 types, the path of growth tends to be facing some of the most difficult stuff we need to face.
Yes.
With compassion and practice, and hopefully with a partner or a community of support that can understand what's going on and support you along the way with some love.
Yeah. So what are there?
Yeah, that's. Go ahead.
Go on. Well, I was just going to ask you about practices. So that, in a sense, you're saying for a 3, perhaps the ability to get in touch with your heart, or to get in touch with your deeper sort of like soul level desires, or what's a real dream for you, if you could stop having to do the kind of performance piece so heavily. Is that to say that there are practices that are just useful for each of the types? Are there any generic practices that you found, no matter who you work with, like this would be a really good thing for you to consider to take on as a practice?
Well, in my experience so far, I mean, there's not necessarily a one size fits all, but some kind of practice around mindfulness with some kind of angle I almost always include that in a coaching engagement, especially if we're doing anything beyond just learning the basics of productivity and the surface level stuff. So whether that's meditation or just inviting somebody to a couple of times a day get up and take a slow walk back and forth around the hall.
Yes.
And just notice your breathing as you're walking. Don't go too fast. Notice whatever you notice. Do that twice a day. Or journaling could be a mindfulness exercise in a way for some. Some people are so allergic to, if you say meditation or sitting, it's just way too much for them.
Yes.
So there's a certain kind of universality to that. I kind of consider some kind of mindfulness practice almost like the general fertilizer on any self-development, any real coaching engagement. So that's universal. But like for a 3, of course, it totally depends on the person and what they're open to, what their interests are, what they've already been doing, what fits in their life and their worldview. But for a 3, I mean, recently I'm thinking of some practices. I have a 3. I invited a 3 client, or a client who identifies as a 3, to have a daily self-observation practice. So, stopping once or twice a day, pausing for a few minutes, looking at a very specific set of questions. And the questions for this person who was a 3 were basic, really simple things around what was my strongest emotion right now? Just simple things.
Yeah.
And in the past few hours, thinking about the people I've been with, what were their strongest emotions and how could I tell?
So really tapping into that emotional self.
Yeah, just because the heart tends to be the kind of the forgotten stepchild for many 3s. They think they're in their heart because they feel passion for their work and getting things done, but they can be forsaking a real deeper connection with what's really going on. Am I really feeling? What are they really feeling? How can I tap into my gift, which is my authenticity as a 3? So simple practices like that. Sometimes somatic practices. I've had some clients who identify as 3s do things like heart-opening poses. So imagine having a bolster that you lie back on and lie on the ground with your arms and heart open, and to experiment with different positions, but all the while with an intention of I'm doing this actually somatically in my body, experience an opening
heart.
And a surrender to something that's here.
Yes.
It could be a variety of things.
Yeah. There's something in what you've said there that I've never contemplated before, or think you've just named it really well, is to do with there are different qualities of the heart. So the distinction you draw between feeling passionate, which often in a world that's very interested in entrepreneurship, it's all like, what are you really passionate about? That has a different quality to, like what really warms your heart, or how can you get in touch with the tenderness of your heart? Tender heart is different than passionate heart, but I guess both are qualities of the heart. And perhaps we tend to...
Can you welcome actually feeling sadness right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Or pain or disillusionment or loneliness, That distinction you made about the different qualities of the heart reminds me of type 7, which somebody I know is a type 7. But I think about a couple of 7 clients that I concluded with last week, and a year ago when I asked them about what are you feeling right now, or what's your connection with your emotional space, the only vocabulary words they had were, I'm happy, I'm excited, and to them that was the universe of emotion.
Yeah, interesting.
And so whenever there was an invitation to, there is this whole spectrum of emotion that I kind of used the cover to Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
I think that cover with the prism and all the light. Is that Pink Floyd? I forget.
I'm not the guy to ask on music, unfortunately.
Okay, never mind. But a prism with all these different colors of light,
Yes.
all the colors of emotion. And, to a type 7, that could seem like, but if I actually feel that, then I'll get lost in that, and then it'll end me. At least that's my experience with some of my 7 clients.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask another question. I'm just going to move the field a little bit, but you're probably used to my doing that. For people who are like into their productivity practices, so for people who are like, yep, I've read David Allen, I know what you're on about. I've also read maybe Tony Robbins, or I probably read some Tim Ferriss. So one of the questions, and I know it's a question I've had, is so once you start to get all your stuff into lists, you're going to be like, right, I've got loads of next actions. And sometimes I can feel like, I've had a day where I've got loads of these little bits done, but it doesn't feel particularly satisfying. It's not like I've really moved the needle on anything like a big project. So I don't know if you've got any ideas for that person as to how you combine both the power of keeping things in the right place and also keeping your attention on what matters most. How do you bring that? It seems like sometimes they're pulling in different directions.
Great question, and there could be a lot going on with that specific example, depending on who the person is and what's really happening.
Yeah.
So, for example, just to give so I as a 9,
mm-hmm.
and, I fall into that sometimes as well. That's part of the passion of the 9. They call it, each type has a different passion, which is kind of the driving quality of the heart that drives personality structure. The passion of the 9 is this thing they call sloth, which is not necessarily laziness, but it's kind of laziness with having to deal with the reality of the situation.
Yes.
The messiness of the world. So in my case, actually this morning was a perfect case of this. I had an intention to go work out. Yes, I'm a coach, and I did not succeed today.
Michael Dolan.
That is true. So I had an intention to go work out because I wanted to work out before this interview, and found myself, getting some good stuff done, some things that were pretty aligned with my purpose,
mm-hmm.
a few things that weren't. But my trouble was, for whatever reason, I kept on pushing off this one very critical, kind of confronting thing.
Yes.
And got unconscious because I was, my own, as I reflect on it, my own experience of that, not getting the right thing done was that idea just got caught in a fog. There was this almost like busyness, and I'm feeling like I'm getting things done, and I'm not even conscious that I'm avoiding this other thing, right? So that might be for a 9, but for like a 6,
mm-hmm.
if they're overloaded, and the 6 tends to have a difficulty trusting their own guidance and kind of overly looking to others and the outside and what everybody else expects and needs more. in the same situation with the six, with all their commitments in one place, and they have some time. The things that they might be avoiding might be the things that are most about them and their own kind of like needs, or what really what they know to be true. They be oriented towards what everybody else expects.
Yes.
So the things that they will avoid are different, and so every type is going to have a version of this.
Yes, got it.
I really don't have any magic bullet other than notice whatever you notice about that, and then be curious about going deeper into the self-awareness piece.
Yes.
Something like Enneagram is a phenomenal tool for having a kind of a set of mirrors to look at in situations and say, wait, if I'm really honest with this, like this, you saw me kind of stumbling with what happened this morning. What was really going on there? And maybe there's not a quick answer, but the answer is always, in a way, when it comes to, if I have my set of practices and the productivity stuff is kind of there, but something else is going on, it's a question of, well, what kind of self-awareness practices, what kind of patterns can you start noticing yourself about the things you avoid, about the overcommitment issues?
Yes.
How you name your stuff, or when you look at it, and just, if you notice something about it, capture the idea and do something about it.
Yeah.
So in other words, just a really simple example for me that I'm probably going to try soon, and I wrote something down about this, is actually setting aside some time on my calendar, and it could move, but just for what I call purposed work. Just for like, okay, this is the time when I'm going to feel my discomfort, really face the stuff that I've been avoiding, and for 45 minutes, I'm just going to do it. And that's just my own experiment with a way to experiment with something, trying something new, a new practice, a way to confront. And the only way I could have gotten there was the self-awareness that I see myself again and again totally avoiding this kind of stuff.
Yes.
So then you have the courage to actually say it, and then take an action of saying, I'm actually going to put on my calendar and try this, or maybe talk to my coworkers or some people I really trust and say, I do avoid this. Call me on this. Ask me how this is going. Involve a community.
Get some enrollment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a system, and there's self-awareness and practices, and you've got to just keep on refining the wheel. There's always something new to notice.
Yes. So let me ask you, this is like a personal question to you and how you organize things. If people are familiar with the language of hard landscape, the stuff that's in your diary that you've committed to, and particularly, in my experience, hard landscape sticks harder with other people than it sometimes does with me. I don't know if that's just my experience, but obviously if you say, right, at 10 o'clock today I'm going to do this, but it's a whole day you've got in the office, then it's easier to move that than if you're physically going out and meeting with someone. So once hard landscape's kind of dealt with, then when you're in the office, particularly say you have a full day in the office, which is completely discretionary time, what do you attend to? Like, what's your process for working out what it is that you're going to do in that day, and whether you just start working down your next action list at context of the office, or whether you think, I've got a whole day, I could take 3 hours and write something, or work on a project that needs more consecutive time. Do you have any ways of managing that? And I don't know if this is just a particularly head type kind of question, but I was coaching someone the other day who's I think also probably a type 7, and I could see that what they wanted was just some way of like a bulletproof way of fitting all these levels, like the levels, the horizons together, so that you could kind of go, oh, if I'm sat here, that's what I should do first because of this algorithm that I have, and maybe that's over complexifying it, but I looked at them and I thought, for ages, that's what I was kind of driving at. I wanted some way that just meant that I was always attending to the right thing at the right time, at the right level. And now I think I probably rely a bit more on my intuitive, like, wow, what's, flick forward to my calendar, wow, 3 days time, I'm doing an interview, so I probably should get onto that.
Yeah, well, boy, a lot of parts to your question, so I'll see if I can address a couple of them.
Thank you. We've probably got about another 5 minutes here, so.
Okay, good. First of all, yeah, your insight that you just mentioned of like remembering. Well, in a way, what you're talking about at one level is, do I have a system and like calendar and lists, and do I have this approach, this productivity approach? Do I have it there to program myself in exactly what I'm going to do when?
Yes. Question.
Or do I use this external method, this self-management system, to support my own choices?
Yes.
So I definitely come across some clients, and sometimes in the Enneagram head triad, like
Yes.
5, 7s, not necessarily 6s, but who sometimes have an artificial assumption that, okay, I'm going to feed the system, I'm going to put all this stuff in this really concise, actionable way in these lists, and I'm going to clear my head, and then I'm going to show up at my desk and it's just going to tell me what to do. Like,
Yes.
we live in this age of technology and
Yes.
computers and software and programming, and there can be this artificial assumption that, okay, well, this approach you taught me isn't working because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing because of what I put in. No. So, we're human beings.
Yes.
We have moods, we have energy levels, we have hearts, we have different thoughts and different states of mind, and
we have relationships.
We have exactly, relationships. We have mortgages. We have reality to deal with, right? So in a way, there's a whole system of practices, and very very much a lot of David Allen's GTD practices that if you do them appropriately and with the right kind of spirit, what it comes down to is, at the moment when you notice yourself having the question, okay, what should I focus on? If something's on your calendar, theoretically, if it's 10 o'clock and it says 10 o'clock, I'm going to do this. That's what you were referring to as hard landscape.
Yes,
Alan, and I agree with David's point of view about this. Is that if you have a real commitment in a time and day kind of way, that this, God darn it, this has to happen from 10 to 11, or else it's not going to happen, or I got a meeting or whatever, then that's the first place you want to look.
Yes.
Right? And, I have the same issue sometimes with having my own commitments to myself. Like, gosh, I have a coaching client tomorrow, and I really need to put aside an hour to reflect and design something for them.
Yes.
Something in that moment when I'm looking at that calendar that either is that I perceive as being more appropriate to do at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm conscious of the ability for me to renegotiate with myself about that thing on my calendar, I'm in a much better position to have a sense of peace of mind and feel on task.
Yes.
And if I blow by it and I keep on blowing by it,
yes,
and I keep doing different things, and the missed commitments are just in my trail. So in my own case, if I have something in my calendar but something else has arisen that takes its place, if I'm really awake and conscious in that moment, I'll do my best to either at least write down and throw in my inbox, like, you have to go back and redo that thing you didn't get to.
Yes.
Or go to my calendar and say, when can I really do this thing that I'm not going to do right now?
Yes.
So part of this is about, again, it gets back to being honest with yourself, having a bit of self-awareness, recognizing that we human beings have the ability to renegotiate with ourselves. What I mean by that is,
yes,
you have something on your calendar, you skip it. Part of this wonderful practice that David Allen calls the weekly review includes a looking back on the calendar and with a little bit of rigor and honesty going, anything that I got to clean up, does this remind me of anything now that I need to recommit to or renegotiate with myself?
Yes.
So we all miss commitments. Come on, we're human. Nobody, if somebody claims they're a productivity machine and they never miss any commitment or missed an agreement with themselves, they're bullshit. Don't hire them, because they're not human. They're claiming to be a machine, and
yes,
think
that's cool.
Machine, right? So renegotiation and self-awareness is kind of where it's at. And if I had an open day, I'd look at the appropriate lists based on, okay, things I could do in this, I'm in my office, so I'm not going to look at my errands list or
Mm-hmm.
my things I'm waiting for from other people list or my someday maybe list or, or my stuff to talk about with my partners or my wife. Because those don't matter right now because they're not here.
Yes.
And I couldn't do those. So I look at a certain subset of my commitments that I could do.
Yes.
Some of them due dates on them that would have them be more or less attractive.
Yes.
Or important. And, everybody's got a different style to this. Some people would look at that and actually say, I'm going to pick that, and that. I'm going to try to go for that today.
Mm-hmm.
For some, that works great. For others, like me, it's a little bit more of a flow. Like, okay, any absolute must-haves here? Oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to set aside an hour for that. Other than that, I'm just going to flow with it. And I might do something spontaneous.
Yes.
So
I like that.
For, on the fence answer.
No, I like that. It's a very good answer. I think we're nearing the end of our time. So I just want to ask if there's anything that you are burning to say or any question that I haven't asked that you'd like me to ask.
No, the only thing that comes to mind is this question of being truly productive and productivity and self-awareness and Enneagram and all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yes.
In a way, the whole point here is, am I really being fully here as myself, as a human being myself right now? Sometimes that means being in action in the world. And, I guess I invite your audience to consider, in my own specific case, what gets most in my way when it comes to being in action appropriately on the things that matter most. And, just pause for a minute or two, take a breath, think about, look at your calendar, look at your list, whatever you have. And if you can just identify one or two patterns that you see or that you know of and you want to remind yourself, and ask the question, is there anything that I can try that's new around that, or anything that I can inquire into in myself to understand this more deeply? Then we're going to be moving the needle.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I hope that this isn't the last time that we do this. I really enjoyed our time together today. Thanks for sharing your insights, your wisdom, and also your humanness and vulnerabilities. I think that's a really nice mix that you've given us. So, yeah, thanks ever so much for spending the time with me this afternoon, and very best of luck with building truly productive leadership.
Thank you very much, Jack. Always a pleasure.
Super. All right. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.